My name is Nasia Meimeteas, and I research predicting the relationship between marriage and the discussion of women's issues in congressional representatives. Marriage is a deeply ingrained social construct. It shapes our views and the choices that we make accordingly. This was studied by Stout et al. In 2017 through the concept of gender-linked fate, which is one's identification with their gender and their perception that their life chances are tied to the success of their gender as a whole. Stout found that there's actually a decrease in gender-linked fate in women after marriage, and that this is a result of them institutionalizing their relationship with their husband and shifting to family-linked fate. This is particularly important to take into account given that Murphy found in 2019 that marriage rates are actually dropping, and millennials are predicted to have a marriage rate of below 75%. Now, while the economic repercussions of this have been given attention by the Urban Institute report of 2020, there's little attention that has been given to the social repercussions, in particular how this drop in marriage might affect the discussion of gender equality and women's issues. Women's issues can be seen as defined in the box below. The sample selected here was congressional representatives, as they reflect the views of the public and serve to do so, and their data is readily available on the internet, as well as the data source selected, which was Twitter, and this was selected because it's a frequent and unfiltered source of representative communication. Now, the gap found here was that there's an uncertainty of the relationship between marriage and the frequency to discuss women's issues, and this study served to establish a quantitative relationship between these two things using a mathematical model. The hypothesis here was that the relationship between gender and this discussion of women's issues is contingent upon current marital status. So married women will be less likely than unmarried women to discuss women's issues, whereas the opposite will hold true for men. The first step in the methodology was actually collecting the data. So tweets were scraped for a total of 408 representatives, totaling to 167,784 tweets. This was done only for the 115th Congress. 3,500 of these tweets were then randomly selected and hand-coded. Then, using computer-assisted content coding, the rest of the tweets were coded using 6 different algorithms. When 5 or more of the algorithms agreed, the program was over 90% accurate. When less than 5 out of 6 of the algorithms agreed, the tweets were revisited and hand-coded to ensure their accuracy. Next, the mathematical modeling. The first step in this was variable selection. Next was the actual creation of the model, and next was testing the model. In variable selection, 2 considerations were taken: multicollinearity and overfitting. These were both avoided. In actually creating the model, the independent variable was gender. A dummy variable was created wherein female was given a score of 1, male was given a score of 0. The dependent variable here was percent female appeal, or the frequency to speak out about these issues. Each representative was given a score between 0 and 1. And the conditional variable was marital status. Married was given a score of 1, unmarried of 0. Now, a few control variables were also added in order to ensure that the isolated relationship between the other variables could be observed without being shifted by any of the control variables. So white, age, Democrat, PVI or partisan voter index, percent female, and total tweets were added. Next, the model was tested using a scatter plot which compared the actual value of percent female appeal with the predicted value, and the closer the best fit line was to having a slope of 1, the more closely related the variables were. Similarly, a t-test was run, and it was I hoped that there would be no significance in the t-test, signifying that the model was also accurate. Next, an actual representative was plugged into the model, and her tweets were also coded in order to determine if the coded tweets and the predicted amount of tweets using the model were similar values. In actually looking at the results, it was found that in the uncontrolled interaction, not including any of the control variables, the relationship between female and percent female appeal had a coefficient of 0.07 with extreme significance. However, married had no significance. The interaction term, however, did have significance as well, with a value of negative 0.02 and extreme significance. Now, when actually graphing this, it was found that females were almost 2% less likely to discuss women's issues if married, whereas males were less than 1% more likely to discuss women's issues if married. Now, in order to verify these results, a controlled interaction was run. Female had the same significance with now a score of 0.06. Married, however, now had significance as well with a coefficient of 0.01. And the female-married interaction term remained exactly the same as in the uncontrolled interaction. Now, when actually graphing this, it was found that females were almost 2% less likely to discuss women's issues if married, whereas males were 1% more likely to discuss women's issues if married. Using this controlled interaction, an equation was written as can be seen below. Now, in actually testing the model, a scatter plot was first created, as previously mentioned. The slope was found to be similar to 1, signifying that the model was fairly accurate. In addition to this, the two-tailed relationship of the t-test was found to have no significance, therefore again signifying the model was accurate. Now, in actually plugging a representative, Representative Elise Stefanik, into the interaction, it was found that the value obtained was 0.05. Now, in coding her tweets, it was found that the value obtained was 0.0455. These were fairly similar, again, signifying that the model is fairly accurate in making predictions. Now, in actually applying this, it was found that married congresswomen were almost 2% less likely than unmarried congresswomen to discuss women's issues, whereas married congressmen were 1% more likely than unmarried congressmen to discuss women's issues. This was consistent with the results of Stout et al.'s findings in 2017 with respect to gender-linked fate. However, the male aspect was added to this, wherein males were more likely to discuss women's issues if married. So this model could potentially be used to alter the voting choices of the public and alter who firms are choosing to fund based upon the score of a candidate. In actually evaluating the study, however, it's not clear if Twitter is truly representative of real-life discussion, although there's no evidence against it. Additionally, it's not clear if the 115th Congress is necessarily generalizable to all other Congresses, as this was in the heat of the Me Too movement, and there might have been heightened discussion of women's issues. However, the current representative of Elise Stefanik was plugged into the model in order to combat this, and it came out to be accurate. So in the future, I'd like to test marital statuses other than married and not married, such as divorced and widowed, and I would like to see if these results can predict any actual behavior, such as voting on ballots, funding, or signing of bills in candidates. So in conclusion, the hypothesis was supported, as married congresswomen were less likely to discuss women's issues than unmarried congresswomen, and married congressmen were more likely to discuss women's issues than unmarried congressmen, and the model was able to predict the likelihood to discuss women's issues and could potentially be used to predict the discussion of women's issues in future candidates as well.